welcome to the Ecology TV. Today I have the pleasure to have in our studio Carsten Pedersen, who is a researcher from Transnational Institute. Hello.
Hello, and thank you, and thanks a lot for this opportunity. Yes, I'm from the Transnational Institute. At the Institute we do research and analysis and produce many reports. And part of the process in the research is that we work closely together with movements from around the world so that we get the knowledge and experiences from the ground. That's very important for the research. We're several teams in the Transnational Institute, and the team I work for is the Agrarian and Environmental Justice team. And part of the focus of our team is on blue growth. So we have just released a new report on blue growth, and for those of you who want to read more about blue growth, you can also visit the website tni.org.
You did a presentation yesterday on the ocean grabbing issue, which we are living here in Mauritius with the case of Pomponet and the Japanese who want to fish in our ocean. How do you address the issue of ocean grabbing?
Well, in TNI we do our analysis together with movements around the world to find out what kind of ocean grabbing, what forms of ocean grabbing is actually taking place around the world. We produced a report on that a few years ago, and what is clear is that ocean grabbing is about many different types of activities. So, I mean, what we have seen in Mauritius, the beach grabbing, is just one form of ocean grabbing. And you mentioned the foreign vessels that is fishing the fish in the sea. But in the workshop we also heard about the fisheries agreement with the European Union. And what is new to me in that regards is that there's actually been no public consultation in Mauritius, and if I understand correct, there's not even been parliamentarian discussions on whether this agreement should be signed or not. And this is another form of ocean grabbing. This is foreign vessels entering the territories of Mauritius without any consultation process with the people of Mauritius.
And you also talk about blue economy. We've heard a lot about the green economy and now the blue economy. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
I mean, the blue economy has become a very big thing over the last few years. It really started with Rio Plus 20 in 2012, where several international agencies and organizations started to talk about the blue growth or the blue economy. I mean, the two terms are used interchangeably. So sometimes people say blue growth, other times they say blue economy, but it's really the same thing. And some of the conservation organizations, international conservation organizations, have pushed this agenda. Many governments and also UN departments have pushed this agenda. And one of the interesting things being in Mauritius is, if you look at the role of Mauritius in the discussions at global level on blue growth, you will actually see that Mauritius is one of the small island developing states that's on the forefront, pushing for the blue growth agenda. So if you go to the World Economic Forum's website, for example, you will see beautiful pictures and reports about the blue growth in Mauritius. The same if you visit the World Bank's website and also other international agencies and UN departments. So Mauritius is really out there pushing for blue growth, and as far as we can see, it is closely linked to an interest for more foreign direct investments and for economic growth, basically. So the interesting thing with blue growth, just as with green growth, is that, well, it's supposed to build on the three pillars of the sustainability agenda. So that is economic development, it is social development, and it is environmental protection. But what is becoming clear when you really dig into what blue growth is about is that it's first and foremost about economic development. I know that many UN departments, for example, the European Commission, for example, it's clear is that if you ask some of the UN departments or the European Commission, they will certainly say that blue growth is about sustainable development and environmental protection. But if you read the policy documents that's available and the reports on blue growth that's available at that kind of addressing blue growth in an international context, you will actually see that there's a lot of focus on the big economic sectors in the oceans. So that means oil and gas is one of the sectors. It means shipping, which is related to global trade as well, because global trade is projected to increase, and 80% of the global trade is shipped across the oceans. And this is also why we see development of many ports for shipping, primarily around the world. I think in India alone they're talking about 18 ports that is being developed. And there are also other important sectors, like the tourism industry is also projected as one of the growing industries in many countries, also in Mauritius, and it's part of the blue economy. And you can question the sustainability of that, because it means there will be more planes in the air all the time to transport all the tourists across the world. Agriculture is another sector that is being promoted, increasingly actually. And biotechnology is a new sector. I think we'll see a lot of focus on biotechnology in the years ahead, because one of the ideas is, for example, to produce biofuels from algae production. And then importantly also to mention, today it's a very small sector, but tomorrow it's projected to be one of the bigger sectors in the ocean economies, that is deep sea mining. So these are some of the sectors that form part of blue growth. And if you look at fisheries, then according to the UN Commission for Trade and Development and according to the OECD, they've both produced reports on the blue economy. Fisheries play a marginal role. So it's like maybe 1 to 4% of the global economy. And this is first and foremost large-scale fishing, which we know is not an environmentally friendly way to fish in general. And small-scale fisheries doesn't even feature at all. So if you look at the global level, then I would say the Food and Agriculture Organization is the only organization that has a blue growth program with a specific focus on fisheries, also small-scale fisheries. And then we could say, well, this is a very positive sign. But if we go to the national level and see what is actually happening, in South Africa, the blue growth plan, which is called Operation Phakisa, does not address fisheries. It's about the extractive industries, oil and gas, construction of ports, agriculture, but fisheries is not included, and the fisher movement in South Africa has not been involved in any processes in the development of this Operation Phakisa. And if you go to many other countries, you will see a similar pattern. So when it's brought down to the national level, when nations develop and implement blue growth programs, then it's mainly about the big economic sectors that are some of the sectors that's actually driving carbon emissions and climate change. So it's not at all environmentally sustainable. And the social development aspect of it is really also marginal. I mean, in tourism, for example, you could argue that it provides jobs, and that's what the government is arguing, and that's what the tourist industry is also arguing. But we do know around the world that the labor conditions of those employed in the tourism sector is not really great. It's often contract work, low paid. So therefore, what we find in our research on blue growth is that it doesn't actually fit the sustainable development agenda. It doesn't contribute to a positive development.
Like we talk about fishing, you just say that it's not the main part of the blue economy, but when you see in Mauritius, when the fishing industry, the big fish industry, it's not Mauritian companies, and the fish that is being fished in our sea is not for Mauritian, it goes elsewhere. And Mauritian are not being able to buy the food that are in their sea, and I think it's similar in other parts of the world also.
Well, just to add a few words to the situation in Mauritius, because we've heard several examples over the last few days, and there's the sea hub in Port Louis, where foreign vessels are also landing the fish, and then it's being processed, and then it's being exported. And this is a good example of how healthy and nutritious food is being exported out of the country, so it's actually not accessible to the local population. But importantly to understand is also that it will be very surprising if there's not more fishing taking place that is actually allowed. There are many cases that has been documented over the years under these fisheries agreement with the European Union, for example, that vessels actually catch more than what they're allowed to, and sometimes they do transfers with the fish that has been caught on sea, so it's actually not ending up even in the sea hub. But the point is also that we hear many fishers complain that the tuna is not coming near shore anymore, and it used to in abundance. And for sure this is also because of overexploitation by the fishing industry. So again, that means that even the small-scale fishers in the country cannot catch the same amount of fish. They have to spend more money on petrol, and they have to go further out on sea, which is really a risky livelihood. So obviously that has an impact on not just the livelihoods of fishing communities in Mauritius, but also access to healthy and nutritious fish for the broader population in Mauritius. And then we also heard that instead, and I went to a fish market yesterday, it was like a fish and chicken shop, and there was no fresh fish, but you could buy fish imported from Indonesia, for example. Yeah. So you can get fresh, or you can get frozen fish from overseas, and often this fish comes from aquaculture.
We have also seen that to address this issue of the ocean grabbing, it's a multi-sectoral answer which is needed, and also most importantly cooperation among countries, especially in the Indian Ocean. When it comes to fishing in the Indian Ocean, there must be cooperation amongst the different organizations, the different islands.
What we've seen over the years is that many of the fishing movements from around the world, they have started paying much more attention to the issue of ocean grabbing. In many countries, there have been campaigns against ocean grabbing, and these are just some indications that it is an increasingly important issue that's on the radar of many of the fishing movements. For example, right now in India, the National Fish Workers Federation in India is campaigning against a new shipping lane that is being projected because of the need for more shipping. And this shipping lane will basically deny traditional fishers from accessing the fishing grounds they've been accessing for generations and centuries. And this is one form of ocean grabbing that they're currently fighting in India. We also know that next week there will be a campaign with public activities in Bali. Next week is the next Our Ocean Summit will be hosted in Bali next week. And this Ocean Summit is also about blue growth, blue economy. And so some of the fishing movements, they're having outside activities where they're protesting because, well, firstly, they've not been involved in the planning, they've not been invited, And secondly, they feel that what's on the agenda at our Oceans conference is not their agenda. So therefore they're protesting against it, and they've written reports or statements as well. One of the global fisher movements, the World Forum of Fisher Peoples, has signed a statement against the activities and proposed alternative solutions. So it's very clear that over the last, let's say, 5 years, there's been much more focus and attention on various forms of ocean grabbing.
But when we see people organizing, there are, as you just said, so many things happening against the blue economy, but at the same time, the system is so big, the capitalist, like, it's huge, and like they are everywhere, and the fight is not equal. How do we respond to this? How do we do? We often feel powerless.
Well, that's a very good question, and it is obviously a tough struggle, as we have seen here in Mauritius as well. But what we see is, well, on the one hand, that movements, fisher organizations around the world, they deepen their knowledge and understanding of what is actually happening in their own national context, and that enables them to react and propose alternative or real solutions to how to address the ecological crisis and the economic crisis. So that's at the national level, but we also see some places where new alliances are being built. So fisher organizations will, for example, work together with other people's movements, together with unions, trade unions. And at the global level, we see kind of a similar pattern. Some of the United Nations spaces are being used to advance the agenda of the fishers. The Food and Agricultural Organization is one where the fishers are, I would say, very efficient and progressive, and pushing for the implementation of the United Nations guidelines on small-scale fisheries, which is a really progressive instrument that the United Nations have endorsed in 2016. So that is a real solution they're putting on the table. But they also, at the international level, increasingly link up with other social movements, for example with La Via Campesina, and where we see they participate in conversations and meetings around food sovereignty, agroecology and food sovereignty as solutions to a capitalist system. So I would say over the last several years we have seen some very positive development from the fisher organizations at the national level, but also at the international level. But it's a long struggle, and one of the challenges is that the fishers have to be on their toes, because there's so many events happening all the time. They have to participate in so many meetings at the global level all the time. All the different UN departments are asking for the fishers to participate in this event and that event, and sometimes it's difficult to understand, well, what is the purpose of participating in this global meeting right now? And yeah, so it I think for some it seems overwhelming and a big challenge, but it is, I would say, it's being addressed. Yes.
And how do you find your participation at the School of Ecology today? What's the importance of discussing and creating such space for people to discuss about these issues?
I think there have been many positive elements of the School of Ecology, absolutely. For me, the most important thing is that activists from Mauritius, but also from abroad, from many of the other African countries, they come, they learn about new issues, they deepen their consciousness, and they also get to understand the capitalist system better. This will enable them to identify, you can say, cracks in the capitalist system so that they can use these cracks and push for alternatives. But to do that, you also need obviously more knowledge and information in terms of positive solutions, the right solutions, and some of these have also been discussed extensively, I would say. So I see that as the most positive thing that this School of Ecology contributes to. So when the participants, they go home and they continue their work in the movements and organizations they belong to, then they have a little bit more in their toolbox, and so they can take their own struggles forward. But I think that there's also, another very important element, and that is we've heard several stories about people being in prisons for practicing their livelihoods, people dying because of health issues, because they can't get access to healthy food, for example. Oppression, increasing levels of oppression against human rights activists and environmental activists. So it's tough. You need to be a strong person to be a political activist like the activists we have with us here. So the important thing is also to build solidarity, and so that people, they get motivation and believe in the struggle and gain the strength to take the struggle forward. I think that's a very important aspect of the school as well.
Okay. Thank you very much, Carsten, for being with us tonight.
It has been a pleasure, and it's been a pleasure being in Mauritius and at the School of Ecology. So thanks.
Thank you.